Build all these? Did you build all these yourself?
Mm-hmm.
And what got you started in all this?
Something to do.
What is it? Was it a kit design or was it your own design or?
Two kits. The first boat was sailboat.
Okay. And then you just started
Everything else is my design.
your design? Okay. How'd you come up with some of this stuff?
See boats that I like and copy them
Oh, okay. You
as
just take,
close as I can.
so you just take pictures of them and
Yeah, I'll take pictures. And
how do you get the like the motors, like the Ford motor on the side?
those are available from Summit Racing as
Okay.
a replica die-cast.
Now, are these built to go in the water? I mean, obviously they're for look, but I mean, can they be built like
Yeah,
that to
they
go in
could
the water?
they could go in the water.
Yeah,
You'd have to put a remote system in them. You know.
right,
I don't, because that would just blow the price way out of sight.
right.
You know, I'd limit my sales potential to probably 5% of the people that would buy one. You know,
Now, what do you sell? Do you sell one of these? You sell these in?
these four here are 300 or 350. Those are 400, and the two in the end are 450.
Okay. Which, to me, would be worth it, all that work you put into them, right?
Yeah.
How long does it take you to build one with all the detail?
6 to 8 months
Wow.
because of gluing time. They're all double plank, just like the real boats.
Huh.
Except for the sailboat, isn't it? It's got a plastic hull.
So do you sell a lot of them? No?
The market's very limited, so
Right,
why, you know, if I double the price, where would the market go?
Right.
It'd go away. And a lot of people say, hey, I don't want to put it in the water. I wonder if it's, you know, the remote stops working. Now I got to figure out what to do.
Right.
Or a big boat comes along and runs over it.
Right. Yeah, that'd be an expensive problem, wouldn't it?
Yeah, because I got to believe the remote would cost you $200 to $300, you know, and the time you buy the boat, the time I put it in, I had to, you know, I don't want to just swap dollars, you know.
Right. Now the golden egg, what's there a story behind that
That's
one?
a kit. That's
Oh,
a
it's
kit.
a kit.
It must have
Okay,
been a boat.
that was the kit one. Okay.
Yep.
Somebody with no money.
I actually like the ones. So the ones, all down there are not kits, right?
None of from there on are not kits.
Okay, yeah, I like because you seem like
And
you put
these
more
three on the
details.
end, the sailboat and the first boat is a kit. The
Okay.
rest of these are what I dreamed up.
Okay. This is a working project here. This.
Yep.
How's that supposed to be like a
50s, 60s hydroplane
hydroplane? Okay.
with a combustion engine in it.
Okay.
No jet power, like they are today.
So maybe next year we'll see that one.
I'll probably have it done by the end of the year, by the
Okay.
end of the summer.
What's your name?
Roger Burley.
Well, thank you, Roger.
And I just want to give you some factual business on that. Harry was an instructor in the third class of sailing school, which was established in 1926. But Harry started teaching in 1928, and he continued for an additional years to 1933. And many of the people perhaps tonight remember him as the fellow that sat down here on this little old dock and waved at you, and you came up and he had a boat here for you to learn from. And so this goes on, and Harry was a staunch supporter of White Lake. And over the years, there have been a whole number of people who have been through his teaching. And the teaching is just the personal part of his existence here. And the marinas represent what he did to control all the rest of us crazy people who, when we want to get out on the water. And I have nothing more to say.
Okay. Okay.
Thank you.
I'd also like to say Lee Holly was one of the sailing school instructors at the yacht club, and the other thing that like when you worked down here, one of the required readings was you had to read the Yonkquist version of the White Lake Yacht Club sailing school thing, and you could have read that and just learned about more about sailing. And anyway, Lee was one of the original. Dan, would you like to say something historically? Come on up and say something. Dan. We are very lucky to have Dan here, and also Jean, who's a very protective wife, so Dan can write, all right? And he's written about looking at history of White Lake Yacht Club and tourism of White Lake, the land between Sylvan Beach, logging the White, more recently the Doctor one. You can sit down, or whatever you like to go.
More than about doctors. My son was a sailing school instructor. We aren't from around here, so I never learned about any boats until I got over here. When we went fishing, it was with a bent pin and a worm. So that's all I know. But I didn't know Harry well. Roger and I interviewed him to write Looking Aft, but and then I met him a few other times. But I have read what he's written, so I thought I'd share a story that he wrote for White Lake Yacht Club News back many years ago. This was when he started his sailing when he was 15 years old, still in high school. And he and his father and Jack Guerin, who was the sailing school instructor at that time, the first one, went to Lake Geneva back in 1927, and they were looking for an A-boat. Times were so tough, and this was a gaff-rigged boat, and everybody else was converting to Marconi rig. So they bought this boat for the cost of the storage, $80. Sold it later on for $225. So he was a pretty good dealer in boats, I would have to say. And then the story is how they brought it back from Lake Geneva. They brought it back to Chicago, stayed overnight. And this is a big boat. I mean, if you don't know an A-boat, it's a 38-footer. And then the mast sticks off the back. So they brought it back over 2 days, finally up to White Lake. And in the meantime, they got a citation in some little town in southern Michigan for something. It was so big, they had to basically go down the middle of the road. They couldn't just hug the one side. This is before expressways. So they're just two-lane roads. And they twisted and turned and made sharp corners and so forth because they weren't modern roads anymore. On one occasion, they stopped quickly, and the Model T Ford that was following them ran right into the mast, destroyed its front end. So there were all kinds of adventures as they were coming back. But they raced that boat for a while, but never won with it because they had to compete with these newer boats. They were still wooden, but they had a gaff rig, and then the newer boats had a spinnaker, while the Black Bottom, they called it, had only a jib. So they really couldn't go very fast. He was a good sailor, but of course you start out in a bad boat. That's the advice I always gave my son: start on a bad boat. You're going to lose anyway, so you can always blame it on the boat. And then as you get better, you get a better boat, and then you feel better about yourself. So that's what Harry did. He had this fleet of boats. The Black Bottom was called that because they painted the bottom with graphite, thinking it would make it be a little more slick as it waddled through the water. It didn't help a lot. Later on, they renamed it the Copper King or something like that. And then they had Hell's Bells. That was a later boat. And many, many others. The only other story I know about Harry is one he told us when we were interviewing him. And it had to do with Skipper's 3, which is now Whitehall Landing. He bought that, and it's right next to the tannery property, as you know, which is now no longer a tannery. And he had a bitter hatred for the tannery. It goes back many years. he'd talk about the stench coming from the tannery and how terrible it was. And he could really go on. So he had this bitter hatred. Well, when he bought Skipper's 3, he discovered that the railroad spur that went into the tannery crossed over his property. And the previous owner had not paid any attention to it. He wanted to be a good doobie and just let the tannery use that property. But Harry refused to have that happen. So he met with their attorney, and every time they offered some money, his price kept going up and up and up. He never would allow them to cross his property with a railroad track. So eventually they had to relent, and they started bringing everything in by truck and shipping out. But I think you can still see where that spur goes off, but they could no longer use it. That's the best I can do.
Okay, Mark.
Question before you go. Could you talk a little bit about Stella?
Me? Well, I can talk. We interviewed both of them, but having interviewed other people, there's a basic rule: you never interview a couple at the same time, and that goes triple with Harry and Stella, because they would have different stories. And when that and again, I can't say that this happened with them because we didn't interview them together, but typically that you start talking to the one and they tell you their version of the truth, and then the other one says, well, that isn't the way it was at all, you know, it was Tuesday, not Thursday. Now they didn't do that with us, but that was what we feared, and that's the only story I know, and it really doesn't deal with her.
Actually, okay, Lila, why don't you come up and say something about Stella? This is Lila and Terry's mother, and Lila, there's a picture of Lila, had Lila in bondage. We tied her to the yacht club rail over there. And anyway, Lila was one of the girls that who helped. And so, anyway, you know, there you go.
I'm very happy that Roger let me know about this tonight, because I have a lot of really fond memories. And as George talked about the education we got, I came here to live when I was 13 and lived 6 months out of the year in the house that didn't look like this, but it was up there. And from 13 to 15, or to 18, excuse me, till I graduated from high school. And my version of Stella and the impact she made on my life, you have to remember, we're talking about a 13 to 18-year-old in the 50s. Now, all of you women here know what we were required. We were either going to have to be a teacher, a housewife, or an airline stewardess. That was our goal. I had the privilege of living with and being taught by one of the most progressive women I could possibly have known in those years of my life, because she ran the boathouse while Harry was in the war, as has been stipulated here earlier. And she was very much the backbone of many, many things that happened here. As you've also gathered from the information, Harry was an absolute bear. But I was off limits to him altogether. Stella protected me all of those years. He never gave me a tongue lashing because she wouldn't allow it. And that doesn't mean I probably didn't deserve it at times. But I know that I also made him very nervous, because Stella let me drive their New Yorker Chrysler into town and buy groceries. Harry was petrified. He was sure I was going to wreck it every time I did that. I used to take the weather on the radio. You guys will remember that. He had a fit every day that I was going to mess up the weather. It was a little radio, and you had 3 numbers that told you the direction and the wind and what else, Roger? I don't remember. But anyway, three numbers, and every day, it had to be at noon, and every day he was sure that I wouldn't get it right. And that tells you a little bit about Harry. But Stella was a very remarkable woman, and as I said, the education I got from her has been with me all of these years. I've probably done a lot of things in my life that were ahead of the game for women. And I'm sure that it's because of that training that came from with Stella. I stayed through into the fall and went to school from here, and Harry would take off hunting and various things. And so that's when Stella and I just wreaked havoc with everything we could get our hands on. We tiled that whole house one year while he was gone. We would get so busy that we'd forget to take out anything to eat. So I was afraid of the saws, so Stella would have to come down and get the meat out of the freezer and cut the hamburger patties on the bandsaw. Then I'd cook them. But true story, it was right back in that corner someplace. I don't know what Roger, those kind of the highlights of.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
There are lots and lots of stories, but it was a real experience, and that training has withstood me my whole life, I'm sure.
Thank you, Lila. Hey, another story would be that Harry was very loud and boisterous, let's say, whatever. But anyway, like if he had trouble with the clients and how that would happen down here, Stella would be in the retail shop on the hill, greet the guy, before he got in the car and drove away, and somehow calm the waters kind of thing. When Lila mentioned, like, he didn't want you driving the car because you might wreck it, one night, the game was that Roger Spillman and I, Harry had a wonderful Chrysler Airflow. Today would be a collector's item. Very, very deco, modern kind of looking. And so Roger and I, we drove into town because you had to go see what's going on in town, right? We came around the corner by the Taggart House, which actually George has now, and the Blue House across the street. And we came around the corner, and as we came around the corner, this tree thing just fell in front of us. And it was one of these, the curse of this location is the northwest wind. And so to get those stern lines, I mean, you have to really, the waves just smash in here. And so it was one of those nights when everything was happening. So we just left the car on the road kind of thing. We came down here and had to deal with it. But obviously, we did crash up the Chrysler Airflow. So he had a background on worried about that. Okay, what else?
I'm Jerry Rowe. I worked here 69, 70, summers of 69 and 70. Of course, Harry was a crusty old salt, the PT boat captain of the PT 192.
No.
He later had a boat he called the Martini 192. And you can imagine what that meant. So I'm on gas dock duty one night. Of course, Harry would come down here every night from their house and sit and have a couple of toonies, as they called them. And I saw this boat round the corner of the channel and head straight for the dock. And I figured, well, he's coming for gas. And of course he was. And I met him down there, tied him off, and started pumping gas. Well, Harry comes strolling out in the dock, the way Harry always did. He was an acquired taste for a lot of people. You either loved him or you didn't. And he walks up and he sees this brand new houseboat. And he says to the guy, this guy with his wife and 2 kids, "Pretty nice boat you got here." I said, "Oh yeah, we're real happy with it. We've had a really good time with it." Harry says, "Well, where'd you happen to pick this up?" He says, "Well, we got it down there on Henry Street, Bob Moore's." Harry pulled out his knife, cut both lines, pushed the boat off the dock, and said, "Jerry, turn off the gas pumps." True story. True story. And Stella Pillinger was an angel. Harry was probably one of the luckiest men on earth. Thank you.
Like George, I'm a 6-year veteran of the Pillinger School of Marketing and Operation. I started my career following Rogers Group. I got here in '53, and I was 15 years old. And on the first day, I stepped on a board that had a nail sticking up, went right through my foot. And of course, they roared me into Doc Angstrom, and he looked it over, poured some Mercurochrome in it, took a stick and said, "Wear shoes." True story. The thing I like the best about Harry, even as a kid, and especially as an adult when I was with him, he would never ask you to do anything he wouldn't do with you. And he could probably do it better than you did. But you learned. And we've all heard about his temper. I mean, he was a legend, even before I knew him, and he never changed. Although I was fortunate enough to see him the summer before he passed. He and I share August as a birth month. So for years we would have a birthday party together, only a week apart. And I remember Barbara and I stopped to see him at his house on Michelinda Road. That last year he was with us, and we had a great visit. And he was very frail, but the spark was still there. And I said to him, I said, listen, old man, I said, I want you to stick around because I'm coming up next year, and I want to have a birthday party. And he kind of looked at me and he said, Jimmy, I'll do my best. Of course, we lost him that next April. I'll give you an idea. He used to go to Florida in the winter. And the first year that I came back to work with him as an adult, I got here in about the middle of February, and about 2 weeks later he said, well, it's your place, I'm going to Florida. And away he went. Here I'm back in Michigan for 2 weeks, and I'm running a marina. We didn't have number 3 yet. And one day I was in the Muskegon Bank and Trust. We had our floor plan there, and for our boats and our motors, and they had just changed bank managers at the Whitehall branch. A young fellow by the name of Odell was the new manager. And he sees me come in the bank and he says, can I see you a minute? And I said, yeah. He said, I've just gotten this directive from the downtown bank that we're going to get out of the floor plan business, and we would like you to pay up your floor plan. I said, well, Mr. Pillinger's out of town, but I said, he calls me every Friday. I said, I'll let him know, and we'll get back to you. Now, sure enough, about 5 o'clock, just about dinner time, was when he would call, get the bank balance, and did you sell anything, and what have you. And I said, I told him about what the bank manager had said to me, and he kind of chuckled, and he said, well, Jimmy, except for my own family, he and Stella were the only ones that ever called me Jimmy. He said, you want to learn this business? He said, I'll tell you what you do. He said, now I can do this. I have funds available, private funds, and I can take out the floor plan. I don't want to because when we get back, I've got some plans that I'm going to need that money for, and you're going to be involved. But he said, I want you to make the call on this one. And he said, whatever you do, I'll back you. Okay, boss. So I thought about it, and I went in the files, and I read the floor plan agreement. Next day I was in the bank at 9 o'clock when they opened up, and I said, Mr. Odell, I said, talked to Mr. Pillinger last Friday evening, and he says, it's my call. So I said, where do you want me to deliver your boats and motors? And I thought Mr. Odell was going to fall right out of his chair. He said, what do you mean? I said, well, I've checked my bank balance and I don't have enough money to take out this floor plan. And so I talked to Mr. Pillinger and he said, hey, you make the call. I said, I'm making the call. Where do you want your boats and motors? He said, well, I'm going to have to call downtown. I said, well, why don't you go ahead and do that? I got things to do. I'm going back to store. And that's when I was working the store down in Montague, because this marina was closed. It was still snow on the ground. And about an hour later, I got a call from the bank president, Dick Morgenstern. I said, just see by the paper, he passed away here recently. I knew Dick, and I liked him. He's laughing. He said, boy, have you ruined Mr. Odell's day. He said, I'll bet you read your floor plan agreement. I said, I sure did, Dick. He said, Mr. Odell didn't. And he said, so you don't have to worry about paying off your floor plan. As long as you make your payments the way you're supposed to, you're good to go. He said, maybe next year, you know, we'll have a different plan, but right now you're good. So, you know, Harry calls the next Friday night, and he said, well, how'd you make out with the bank? I told him. I said, well, I told Mr. Odell, the new manager there, that I wanted to know where to deliver his boats and his motors. And he said, you didn't? I said, yes, I did. Well, what did he say? He didn't say anything. He was in shock when I left the building. But he said, I got a call from the bank president, and we don't have to worry about it. They're not calling that note. But I learned a lot from both of them. I got hollered at, fired, rehired, just like everybody that ever worked for him. There's not one person who ever worked for that man that didn't get fired at least once, and maybe twice. But he didn't really mean it, because, you know, the world changed when Roger and our group worked here. We lived here, we ate here, he paid us. My first year here, I got here right after high school, got out in June. I stayed until Labor Day, $250 for the whole season. Now how do you live on, and you don't get any money till the end of the summer. So how do you live? Well, back in those days, over the club, they had parties on Saturday night, and they sold beer to the members, and they had a beer table out on the back porch. And me and one of the other guys got hired to be there to hand out beers to Dr. Holly or the Gillens when they came. I mean, I've met people back in the 50s that are still my friends. And but they'd give you chips. We didn't handle any money, but we got tips. And I could pick up $4, $6, $7 a night in $1953 every Saturday night. It was wonderful. I made more money at the club than I made here. But that was okay. Harry didn't care. As long as we had hit the firing line, put in our 12-hour day, everything was cool.
Right.
You know, it was a wonderful experience. I mean, I think George really said it. The things that he learned from Harry and Stella were better than a college degree by a lot. And I say that today with a smile on my face, because as many fights I had with that man, I loved him like a family member, and I loved Stella like a mom.
The story I always thinking of was that Hooker was fined for doing some lake pollution or something like that. The money then was deposited with the state of Michigan, and Michigan somehow, it was for maybe marina development. And so Harry's point of view was something like, you know, well look, that is White Lake money, it came from Hooker, it's going to be spent here in White Lake, and we're going to spend it and improve the Whitehall Marina. Is that a true story, Dad?
They did.